Here are some terms that you should know about magazine design or publication design. We'll take a look at a few pages and get a sense of what the vocabulary is. If you look at these two facing pages from a magazine spread, if you start at the top right, you'll notice that there's a caption that goes with the photograph, and that's very important to have a caption for every photo within a design. On the bottom right, you'll see a quote from Robert De Niro. And in publication design, we would call that a pull quote or a pull-out quote. When it comes to the left-hand page, starting at the top, you see the little tag at the top that says Robert De Niro. We might call that a kicker headline or sometimes an eyebrow headline, just a tiny little label that would go over the main headline. The main headline in this case has some style to it. It's not just a straightforward headline. So we would call that a headline or maybe an art head. Going down the right-hand side of that left page, the first paragraph of the story we would call an intro. It might be written as a headline or a subhead to introduce the rest of the article. It's important to have a byline with a story that tells us who has written the story, perhaps even who has done the photography, an illustration, or the design. And then over to the left-hand side of that left-hand page, there's a little bit of white space. So it's important to think about using white space as an entry point to a design. It kind of gives a visual rest or a pause, and it invites people into the page. Here are another few pages that we'll look at from magazine design. You'll see a very large initial capital S with the art head. Up at the top, I would call that an intro paragraph. This story is introduced without starting the story on these opening pages. There's an intro that is in the circle of the O on the word for. So, of course, there's no one way to go about designing a page, but there are some commonalities and important vocabulary. When it comes to certain publications, I believe this is from Vanity Fair, there will be just sort of a description within the designing staff or the editing staff so that people know what to look for. It's almost the DNA or the branding guidelines of their publication. They say a big, bold title. It's going to stand out from the rest of the page. It's instantly eye-catching. That intro might be insight as to what the article is about using an italic font for this particular magazine. It stands out from the rest. It gives the overall appearance a touch of class. They suggest a large initial cap. That letter I, the large letter I, starts the beginning of the article, making it clear where the start is. They are designing on a grid with two separate columns of text that makes it look professional, using the same font throughout the entire publication for text. So you'll see that every publication will have their branding guidelines. And it boils down to the clarity and simplicity and the finesse that is given to typography. I would say that typography is the thread that holds together a publication. When type has a lot of little errors, it kind of makes us think, the entire publication hasn't been edited well. These are called bad breaks. That might be a hyphenation within a headline. It might be ending line on a headline that's not filled out. It could be a widow, as with the last few characters in that first paragraph, or it might be just really inconsistent spacing. So those are all typographical bad breaks that we want to avoid. Within text, when we're designing in columns, we want to make sure that we don't make that column too wide. Anything that is over about 60 characters is going to be too wide for people to want to stay with and read. So this piece of text at the bottom might make people kind of stop reading because it's just too much to go into. And it would be better to break it down into 2 columns or 3 columns, or maybe even to increase the point size over that width. So a suggested maximum width would be about 60 characters. I would recommend that you not try to stretch small type across the full width of a magazine page. Nobody's going to read that, frankly. We spoke about a widow, just a few characters at the end of a paragraph. And along with that, an orphan is a technical term for a few characters that end up at the top of another page or another column. Those are things to avoid, and those are bad breaks. Here's another design from Rolling Stone. And 2 pages that are facing within publication would be called a double page spread. There's a really nice marriage of word and image. We can see that he is looking into the story, so the direction of the photograph makes a big difference. Now, when you have 2 pages that face each other, but it's just the very center of a magazine, and that page is actually one piece of paper, that is called a double truck. And in this case, if we had a double truck, this would be stapled down the middle, but it would actually be one piece of paper. And here are other examples where the images, work beautifully across that double truck. Same here. So you don't have to worry quite as much about where that fold will last. It's always very important not to put text within the fold unless it might be something that is like this headline. But you wouldn't want to put any text of the story on the fold. But the fact that this is one sheet of paper within the publication would make it a double truck. So here we have the art head on this story, we have an intro, we have the byline. And then I want to talk for a moment about a folio, which is something that includes the page number. It might include the date of the publication and or the name of the publication. So the folio can be at the top of the page or the bottom. And then this photograph over on the right-hand page, the idea is that it would bleed off of the edge of the paper. And within the printing field, that is called a bleed. And as a designer, we would need to make sure that we design this so that the photograph actually extends beyond the edge of the paper, so that when they print it, they actually have a little bit to cut off. So you would bleed that photograph, in general 3/8 of an inch, so that the printer has enough of that photograph to trim off. And we would end up putting crop marks where this actually would end, where the pages end, so that the printer would know where would fit, okay? So the folio, again, could include the name of the publication, it would include the page number, and it might very well include the date. Top or bottom of the page, that's a folio. This one design is a double page spread, and it is designed in columns, provides structure. The space that goes between those columns of text is called a gutter. So those are the gutters. A margin that goes around the external part of the page, and that's a place that you might put a photograph in for a full bleed, but you would be very careful not to put text that needs to be clearly read within that margin. It's just kind of a boundary. So we've got our margin. An initial cap, the first letter of the first paragraph, to draw attention, to give you a sense of where to start. And we can use pull quotes, just kind of reminding you of what these things are called. And all sorts of publications, books and annual reports, newspapers, magazines use a column, and a lot of this design will be set up for the entire publication so that you have kind of a common DNA to the design. Again, an intro, byline is important, initial cap, folio, and a caption for every photograph. It doesn't make any sense to have something where people are trying to guess who's in the photograph. So, just a few of these terms that we've talked about: headline or art head, kicker is label that might go above a headline, captions, bylines, intro, pull quote or pull out quote, the use of white space to help draw the eye. It's not necessary to fill every corner of a page design. In magazines or books, you would be designing on a column grid, and we'll have another little video about designing on the grid that you'll watch. The space between those columns are gutters. Folios are page numbers, an identifying element to what the publication is called, what the date is. We talked about initial caps, widows and orphans, bad breaks, double page spread, which is two pieces of paper put together in a magazine, versus a double track, which is the very center of a publication where it's all printed on one piece of paper and then folded and stapled. The margin is important, using a bleed to make sure that the printer has enough of the photograph to be able to bring it out to the very edge of the paper, and using crop marks. That's it.